Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. We use this design tool called Canva. Some of you might as well. You may not know the story behind it though, and actually at one point of this founder's career when she was pitching for an investment, an investor fell asleep during Melanie Perkins' pitch. Yup, actually nodded off. But today that company's worth $60 billion. And today we want to chat about what happens when you pick yourself up after those moments that make you want to hide under the covers forever.
Or you could just stay hiding under the covers.
We could. Sometimes
it's so tempting. It is so tempting sometimes to just be like, what is it? Today is too hard. I just stay in bed. Just watch some rom-coms. As per Everything Power Suit, you have our full permission to stay in bed for that day if you need to. But then what happens next? What happens to get you out of that failure and get you back into the next step? Our bodies and brains are working against us to tell us to give up, to quit while we're behind, to change that mindset and move forward.
Did you know that our brains process rejection in the same spot as physical pain? So if we were getting one of those, what is it called, MRIs or CTIs or some sort of acronym. I'm thinking of all the medical shows.
UTIs.
Yeah, if we were getting one of those. No, our brains would light up in the same spot when we're rejected and AKA we fail. So getting turned down for a job lights up the same brain area as stubbing our toes. And our brain, our ancient brain, we talk a lot about our lizard brain, sees rejection as death. It is bad. And so all things are firing. And it's also why we feel physically sick when we mess up, because our brain is in overdrive.
Well, and even I think if we were to extend this to sometimes things are outside of our control, and it's not necessarily that we failed. You might have been overlooked. Something bad might have happened. There might have been a restructure in your company, stuff that is outside of your control, but it still leaves you with that same horrible feeling of doom, or that somehow things have gone awry. Your purpose, your plans, all your goals are now up in the air, and it's not a comfortable feeling for anyone. But it doesn't. It's not just limited to mistakes we make. It's all sorts of situations, all sorts of pickles put us in this mode. So now we've ticked off the science. Now we've been your 2-minute scientists with a couple of examples, which have been incredibly hilarious to look into, of some famous fails.
Well, not only fails, but the next step after the fail, because we're titling this podcast, Keep Going. And these are perfect examples of people that failed. But then we should also chat about how they pick themselves up. We introduced Melanie Perkins at the top, but she actually pitched 100 times and got over 100 no's before she finally found investment, again for a tool which many of us have used or used today. And she actually figured out that she'd flown the equivalent of 4 times around the world just pitching to investors who kept saying no, which is incredible.
And I think sometimes we can be guilty of thinking, when you see someone like her, who's now, I think she's the richest woman in Australia, something like that. I might be making that up. She's right up there though. She's got a lot of money.
There's a mining magnate, but you're right.
She might be the
there.
richest self-made woman or something.
Nice.
And you look at someone like her and you just assume she always had it, that X factor that makes someone successful. And if you can imagine, I think very few of us included, have sat in front of 100 people and got rejected. Like, that is a horrifying prospect. And the fact that she had to go through that and every time dust herself off is actually a really great indication of what it takes to be successful. It's never quite the glossy story that we think.
Yeah.
Some other ones that I thought were really interesting. This is one of my favorites. Walt Disney, inventor of Disneyland, Mickey Mouse, etc. He was fired from the Kansas City Star, a very famous newspaper, in 1919 because his editor said he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Again, this is such a common situation where you get feedback, and I use quotation marks for that, criticism effectively from a manager, a peer, and a person in your life who tells you something so incredibly cutting, that can turn into a limiting belief. You can internalize it and think you're no good at that thing, or you can go forth and start the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah, Oprah Winfrey also, she was an evening news reporter and apparently got fired because she couldn't sever her emotions from her stories. And then many of us will know Anna Wintour, of course, while a junior fashion editor at Harper's Bazaar. She did lots of shoots, but apparently a guy, Tony Manzala, thought they were too edgy, so she got fired after about 9 months.
And I love those two examples because both of those, they were fired for their strength. Oprah is now known for her empathy and ability to express emotion. And Anna is obviously incredibly famous for the front covers and for the Vogue magazine September edition. And her style that was too edgy is now world leading. So I just love that both of them took that criticism and recognized it was a strength and then moved in to find something that worked better for them.
Yeah.
I like Thomas Edison. He invented a lot of things. He was the guy who did the light bulb. There's controversy over there, isn't there?
I don't know.
I think there's a couple of people maybe.
Only you would know that.
I get into hashtag old drama. He was around in 1867 and he was working at the Western Union. And while he worked there, he used to secretly conduct experiments, which sounds like a fun time. So he spilled some acid and it ate through the entire floor. So he was fired. Again, horrible, shocking situation. But he used that as an opportunity to go, stuff it, I'm going to pursue inventing full time. And that may or may not have led to the light bulb being discovered.
That's a good story. And I love also accidents can cause incredible next steps. Post-it notes, great example. Someone who tried and tried again to make glue, completed however many numerous failed attempts of making glue, and then founded Post-it notes, which, we all use.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Turns out about half of science breakthroughs, major breakthroughs, were discovered as a result of an accident. They were happy accidents, which really just indicates that a lot of life is a lot more of a gamble than we realize. But it is about that tenacity. It's about sticking with it, getting curious when things go awry, which is what all of these stories have in common. When you get a setback, rather than giving up, getting curious and going, where could this path lead me in a different direction? My favorite, before we move on, is Marilyn Monroe, known for being probably one of the world's most beautiful women of all times. When she was trying to start her career, modeling agencies told her she should consider becoming a secretary.
Maybe it was during the waif phase or something? Was she a bit too curvy or something?
Could be, I don't know. I've seen
knows?
Kim Kardashian wear her dress and I got to tell you, she wasn't that curvy. She was minuscule.
True that. It's interesting though, I was thinking, and actually science is the perfect example of experimentation, failure, and this concept of keep going. And so now what? And I think a lot of startups and that lean startup culture has adopted it, but they've effectively just grabbed it from the scientific world because anything, for the most part, is one big experiment. So love taking that from science. We've got a couple things to talk about today. First is that motivation is overrated. But secondly, how important your bounce back crew is. I kind of thought this was interesting about motivation, Nat. What is it? Motivation eats strategy for breakfast? No, I just made that up, by the way.
Action eats strategy.
I'm just using it.
Kristen, you're doing my trick of taking an established quote and trying to make it your own.
Yeah, well, I'm crowbarring it into Power Up here. But isn't it funny that we often think that we need to feel motivated to take action? And that's why, when I wake up and I don't feel like going for a walk, or it's raining, or I don't want to go for my run, or I don't feel like eating well today, whatever that is, I'm like, oh, well, not today. I'll start tomorrow. So it's like we've got this weird tying action to motivation. But research shows that we get it backwards, that motivation follows action. It's not the other way around. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's what PowerSuit was founded on. And we've actually just come off a peer coaching session. So we get probably about 50 PowerSuiters joined, put them into breakout rooms of 3, and they did some peer coaching, 10 minutes each on each other to really tackle a goal or a challenge. Amazing. That is terrifying for a lot of people. But if they've gone to a mini masterclass and they've gone into a breakout room, maybe the second time, by the third time, they're motivated to take that next step. If we'd asked them to go straight in and give and receive peer coaching, they probably would have said no. So I think even that is a great example of, by not focusing on that whole mountain and the 20 steps ahead. Just focus on that next step. Once you've ticked that off and you've had a win, winning is so important. Had a win, had a really nice connection, had a good conversation, had a light bulb moment, you will want to take that next step. And before I throw back to you, we actually had someone on that peer coaching session who we met, would we have met her about a year and a half ago, year ago? And we were delivering an in-person training for a company. And at the end, she put her hand up, and I think we'll always remember her as like the founding member. And she said, I didn't want to come here today. I thought this was going to be BS. I was too overwhelmed, too overworked. I couldn't think of anything you could possibly do that would change that. When we saw her today on the call, firstly, she turns up at virtually everything now. Secondly, she's completely changed her job into something she enjoys more, and she says no to everything she doesn't need to do. And she puts that all down to turning up that one day to that session. And she did tell us that day she was about to quit her job. So she is the embodiment of this, of you had the option of quitting, but instead you took a little action and that led to motivation, and now your life has gone on a totally different tangent. And that is just one example of people doing stuff like that.
I know I have noticed in the past couple of years that I'm really guided by my emotions. So if I feel, I am. So I'm like, everything's great when I'm happy and we have a small win and everything's great. And then everything's really bad if we have a little bit of a setback and I'm feeling down in the dumps. So, we're certainly not perfect. We're victims of our own lizard brains. But the thing is we have actually learned not to trust our feelings and to trust the systems and the processes we put in place. And I loved we used that a lot at our last startup, was just trust the process. We try one thing, we learn something. Does it work? Does it not work? We iterate on that. So we make small changes, or we put that in the rubbish bin and try something totally different. And then if it works, we kind of carry on and double down. But we are trusting the process of learning and learning by doing. And so this motivation is overrated, is so true, because if we were to trust our feelings, well, I don't know, what would we be doing? We'd still be under our covers.
I'd be under the covers. I'd be watching Julia Roberts and whoever living their best lives on TV. Yeah. But I think we also have just had a weekend in Wellington, where we live, that had, well, actually in New Zealand, there was a lot of sporting events on this weekend, particularly running. We have this event called Round the Bays, where thousands of people start from town, run around the waterfront to the end of this course. And there's an 8-kilometre option and a 21-kilometre option. All of them, I went to the finish line of the Round the Bays, knew a few power suitors, cheered them on. And what I thought was so interesting is you watch the elites come through, and then you watch everyone else, and there is all shapes and sizes, all running styles, people who were absolutely at their limit and people who still had some energy, and just watching them and just seeing, again, just the personification of one step in front of another. And they had made it and pushed themselves and did something that maybe they'd had to train for a long time for. And I think that's what I kind of like about running at the moment, is really just showcases, like, you want to give up. It gets really hard. Running is hard. You're puffed. Your legs are sore. All of that stuff. But as long as you can make it to the next step, then you can make it to the next step. And I feel like that's where science and exercise often are really great examples for work too, because they really teach you that it is actually that simple.
But it's also the system or the process that you go through to run. So it's like, I've got the shoes and I might have the water bottle out for when I return. I've got to block out the time. I've got to put my shoes on. I've got to open up the door. Like, you make it least complicated as possible so that you do it. But I love this concept of just create the system and trust the system. So back to Melanie Perkins and anyone who's done kind of anything interesting or hard or ran or, learned something new, is she didn't wake up motivated to face another investor rejection. And you don't wake up and go, oh my gosh, this running is going to feel amazing. It might after, but it might not during the process. But she built a system much like you are. And she was like, okay, I'm going to book the meeting. I'm going to show up. I'm going to gather feedback and iterate. So she actually viewed it as this looped process. So she's like, I get another reaction? Fine. I'm just going to repeat the process. And the process is what gave her motivation. Like, how's she doing the thing? Because it's probably, well, and we know it took her one step closer to securing investment and ultimately resulting in massive success.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, even if we look at a lot of the things that power suitors often worry about, things like turning up at a networking event and having an awkward interaction or public speaking and mucking up, it's that concept of you do it once. And it's probably 50-50 chance, could go either way. But if you create a system of, I'm going to go to one coffee meeting a week or whatever it is that you commit to that's small and achievable, your sample size, oh my gosh, we are so science today. Your sample size will increase. And one bad networking event out of 10, not that scary. One out of 100, it's just a blip in the bucket. So creating those systems, I totally agree. And I think on the round the base front, the system was the training program, starting the couch to 5Ks, whatever it is that people do, the Stravas where they're doing the love hearts on the lawns or however, whatever it is, whatever your system is, back that. Because if you're just focusing on the end result, huge, intimidating, scaring. Whereas if you've got all I need to do is this today and then that tomorrow, and I will eventually get there, it makes life feel so much easier.
So don't be like us. Forget those feelings. Motivation is overrated and just take the step. And the second thing we want to chat about is building your bounce back crew. We talk about this all the time at PowerSuit, is your people, your tribe, your peer group, whatever that is. You are not alone, your community. And we've experienced that firsthand at the end of our Power Match peer coaching session today as part of the membership. And the women came back buzzing. Not only could they voice their goals out loud, but they found their people to hold them to account. And some had already booked coffees, virtual coffees after the fact. Others said, oh, we chatted about podcasts, pottery, career challenges, menopause, all this great stuff. But the thing is we do not have to do this alone. They're going to remind you of why you started the hard thing and of who you are and what matters to you. That's always helpful because sometimes we lose sight of that. Any other things you can think of?
Well, I like the telling you the truth even when it's hard, because this week started pretty hard for me. And my girlfriend actually commented last night when she got home. She's like, I'm so pleased you have those people around you, because I could go to, how many people? 4 people I went to straight away and said, firstly, tell me if I'm overreacting. I'm going to share with you what's happening, and I need your honest input into am I responding too emotionally? And I'm very happy to hear that I am. In fact, it would be great. Turns out I wasn't. And then secondly, help me get through this. And that is having the ability to have those people around you. And you often build up that ability in the good times where you practice sharing feedback. So when it's tough, you can tell with those people, they are going to be honest with me. They're not going to leave me. They're not going to pander to me. They're not going to blindly jump on. They're going to be really measured, and they're going to be my sidekicks getting me through it. So I think that ability to tell you the truth, even when it's hard, actually, especially when it's hard, because you'd rather your team to tell you the truth than other people to be saying it behind your back.
And what I love about a bounce back crew, and your one in particular, is that there was immediate focus on the next small step. So it was like processing and empathizing and relating, and there's all this stuff. Ultimately, the focus was on where to from here. So able to kind of hone in on what is your next small step that you have to take.
That group that I pulled on yesterday, one of them is someone who thinks quite differently from me, has a very different life experience than me, and often is the person to tell me that I'm overreacting or to move on. And I particularly chose that person because I knew he would be truthful. So I think making sure you don't have yes people as well, that you've got that friction.
I once saw a quote from Brené Brown that first I really liked, but I've been mulling it over a little bit, and I'd like to expand her thinking a little bit. if I could just layer my thinking onto Brené Brown.
In your quote.
So Brené Brown's listening. She said this quote about never take advice for someone who's not in the arena with you. And I can appreciate that, because when you're looking for your bounce back crew, the trick is finding people who are somewhat in the game, right? Like kind of, they can understand what you're going through, and they can maybe relate to your experience. I'd like to expand that a little bit, because I think there's a lot of people in our bounce back crews that aren't necessarily in the arena with us, but we've invited them into our arena. So they know everything about what we're doing. They know why it matters to us, and they may not relate exactly to what we're going through. In fact, some of my best people, bounce back crew, aren't in the startup game, but they know what I'm going through because I am so important to them. So I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Like, make sure that it's either people that are in the arena, but what about those that we invite in? Don't forget them either.
Yeah, I really like that because it's that diversity of perspectives, isn't it? And the final part, I think we've talked about the next steps, but help you find the lesson in the mess, which I think is a biggie as well, because failure, first attempt in learning, and I actually do quite like the acronym, but that idea of that Melanie Perkins sitting after each pitch, one option was to just consider a total bomb out and a failure, or the other option was to get curious about what the things she could improve next time. And I think sometimes when you're right in it, and it doesn't have to happen immediately, but when you're right in that chaos or that distress or emotional reaction, it can be really hard to find that lesson. And having people on your crew to go, okay, what can we learn from this? Even literally asking that question, what can we learn from this? It transforms it. If you go back to all those hilarious famous people examples, they found a lesson in the mess and they pivoted. And that is quite hard to do on your own without having people to soundboard or to challenge those different answers. And yeah, so to me, that's a really biggie as well.
Well, the action that we're going to share today, before I jump into my quote, is think about something that you've been avoiding. What's the smallest next step you can take towards that something?
What have you been avoiding?
Going to the gym, because I know I'm nearing an age where muscle starts to deplete, muscle mass, and they talk about how important muscle is during menopause, and osteoarthritis and osteoporosis can happen as women age. And then we fall and we end up in hospital and die early. So ultimately, connecting those dots, it's like, I know I should be able to go to the gym. And I've been avoiding creating a process to kind of say, this is the night that I've locked out for the gym, which means that all of these things have to be true. I need the night, I need the time, I need the gym pass. Like, there's all these stupid barriers in the way. So the smallest step is actually just go to the gym and solve the whole gym pass problem. And then kind of take the step before, I hate to say it because we've gone on about process and system, but I actually have to take the step before setting up the process. And it's kind of all related, because if I were to wait to have everything perfect and aligned, I probably won't do it. So if I drive to the gym and get the key and get the new pass to get into the gym, I'll just create a process around that step.
I love that. And I love that that's a really realistic example of that. We do tend to wait for everything to be in place, but sometimes you have that first action is the key that unlocks the process. And if you don't take that first action, it just sort of still sits to the side. Yeah. I was doing the same, funnily enough, with health, that I've been getting better health insurance. If you are someone who has health insurance, please check to make sure you're covered for the things that are important to you. I had checked that and realized that I wasn't. But one of the big barriers with health insurance is you get really confronted with all the health issues that could go wrong. And then that triggers all sorts of things around people in your life or fears. And so I was delaying that, but I had a very interesting start to the week in which there was also a health scare in my family. And so that just got me right off the sidelines and getting it sorted. And again, it's just that one little action of reading through and just getting it done, because fear was holding me back, because I just don't want to think about that stuff, which is often the barrier.
The lizard brain. It's not your fault, Nat. It's your damn brain.
We're just lizards. We're little lizards.
I'm going to leave you with a quote, and this is from Reshma Sojani. She is the founder of Girls Who Code. Success is not about never failing, but rising every time you fail. What I've learned is that rejection is just a redirection, and failure is an opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently.
I love that.
So good.
Success is not about never failing, but rising every time you fall. I like rejection as just a redirection. Redirection. I feel like there's a song in that.
There's certainly a hashtag in it. Amazing.
Let's go forth and get rejected. Gosh, go. We all need a bit more rejection in our lives.
Let's go forward and take the small step to the thing you're avoiding. I hope everyone's well. Thanks for the 5 stars. We love getting those fabulous, notes of appreciation from you.
We love badges. We love pins. And 5 stars is a pin for us.
Yeah, that's right. And check out powersuit.com.
Star chart even.
Exactly. And check out powersuit.com for more information about Powersuit and to connect with your Bounce Back crew. Take care, everyone. We'll chat soon. Bye.
Bye.